What if the most terrifying crash stories weren't accidents you forgot, but moments the world could never erase? These are the 8 most disturbing car crash deaths of all time. Tragedies so sudden, so violent, they shattered families, shook nations, and left questions that still echo years later. From rising stars frozen in youth to ordinary mornings turned catastrophic in seconds, each crash became more than a headline. They became haunting reminders that in a single heartbeat, metal can twist, flames can rise, and history can change forever. Jean-Claude Léonard. October 23, 2015 began as a quiet autumn morning in southwestern France. Jean-Claude Léonard, 73 years old, boarded a local bus with his wife and dozens of fellow retirees from the small village of Petit-Palais-et-Cournon. They were members of a senior citizens club setting out on what was meant to be a short scenic trip through the vineyards near Puy-Seguin. Many on board were lifelong friends. Some were married couples who had spent decades side by side. It was an ordinary outing, simple and familiar, the kind of day that carried no hint of danger. Only minutes into the journey, as the bus traveled along the narrow, winding departmental road D17 near Puy-Seguin, a logging truck approached from the opposite direction. The truck was driven by 30-year-old Cyril Alexander with his 3-year-old son inside the cab. The vehicle was hauling timber and gasoline for chainsaws stored in an external tank. As it entered a sharp curve, the truck appeared to lose control. It jackknifed across the road and collided head-on with the bus. The force of the crash ruptured the truck's fuel tank. Gasoline spilled onto the roadway and quickly spread beneath the bus. Within seconds, sparks ignited the fuel. Flames engulfed both vehicles almost immediately. Survivors later described how rapidly the fire spread, how plastic interior panels melted and thick smoke filled the cabin. Many passengers were elderly and had limited mobility. Escape routes became blocked by heat and chaos. Jean-Claude Léonard and his wife had just fastened their seatbelts when the impact occurred. He managed to unbuckle them and guide her toward an emergency exit. Once outside, he realized that most of their friends were still trapped inside the burning bus. Ignoring the growing danger, Jean-Claude ran back toward the flames. Together with another driver, he pulled 2 passengers free before the heat and smoke forced them back. The tires exploded under extreme temperatures, and the bus was soon reduced to a charred shell. Out of 50 people aboard the bus, only 8 survived. 41 passengers died in the fire. Cyril Alexander and his young son also lost their lives in the truck. In total, 43 people were killed, making it France's deadliest road accident in more than 30 years. The aftermath left an entire community grieving. Identification of the victims took weeks due to the condition of the remains. Investigations examined the dangerous bend in the road and raised broader concerns about fire safety and emergency preparedness in public transport. For Jean-Claude Léonard, survival came with the memory of a morning that began in peace and ended in devastation, a day that forever marked his village and everyone who lived through it. If you believe Jean-Claude Léonard's decision to run back into the flames was an act of true courage, comment yes below. If you think no one should ever risk their life that way, comment no. Hannah Eimers. November 1st, 2016 began like any other quiet Tennessee morning in McMinn County. 17-year-old Hannah Eimers was driving north on Interstate 75 after spending the night at a friend's house following a Halloween costume party. She left early, heading home before school, the highway stretching ahead in that pale blue light that makes everything feel ordinary and safe. Hannah was the oldest of 10 siblings in a blended family, a bright and driven young woman who had already earned her high school diploma at 15. She spoke multiple languages, loved music and acting, and had a passion for cosplay. More than that, she cared deeply about children with special needs, even learning sign language so she could communicate with them more meaningfully. Her future felt expansive, almost luminous. Somewhere along the interstate, her car drifted off course. She tried to correct it, steering back toward the roadway, but the vehicle swerved into the median and struck a guardrail known as the Lindsay X light. The device was designed to telescope inward during a crash, absorbing impact and reducing the force on the vehicle. Instead, according to crash findings, the guardrail failed to collapse as intended. The steel rail pierced through the driver's side door, striking Hannah in the head and chest, continuing through the interior before finally stopping. The car dragged the embedded metal roughly 15 to 20 feet before coming to rest. Hannah died instantly. In the passenger seat, her friend survived with only a minor cut, a stark and painful contrast that deepened the shock surrounding the crash. Her father, Steve Immers, was an EMT who had witnessed severe accidents throughout his career. Even with that experience, he struggled to understand how a crash that appeared survivable had turned fatal in seconds. 4 months later, grief gave way to disbelief when he received a letter from the Tennessee Department of Transportation addressed to Hannah. Inside was a bill for nearly $3,000 charging her for the replacement of the damaged guardrail. The notice felt mechanical and detached from the reality of what had happened on that stretch of highway. As Steve searched for answers, he discovered that just 1 week before Hannah's crash, Tennessee had removed the X-Lite from its approved products list due to concerns about its performance at highway speeds. Despite that decision, more than 1,000 of the devices remained installed across the state. Reports indicated that at least 19 deaths nationwide had been linked to X-Lite guardrails, with allegations in several cases that the rails did not telescope properly, but instead penetrated vehicles. Steve began traveling extensively, logging over 20,000 miles across more than 15 states to inspect X-Lite installations himself. He reported finding numerous examples of damaged or improperly installed units. In North Carolina alone, he examined more than 200 and claimed nearly all showed serious issues. Tennessee began removing the guardrails from roads with speed limits above 45 miles per hour, while other states moved more slowly, citing the multi-million-dollar cost of replacement. Further concerns emerged about how some highway safety devices were tested. A 2016 government report described a serious conflict of interest in cases where private laboratories conducting safety tests were owned by the same manufacturers producing the equipment. The X-Lite had been tested by a lab owned by its maker. Advocacy efforts by families, including Steve, contributed to a rule added to the 2021 federal infrastructure bill requiring independent testing of highway safety hardware. For Hannah's family, the reform came years after her death. Other families affected by similar crashes filed lawsuits. In one Tennessee case, Lauren Budd and her stepbrother Jacob Davidson died in an incident involving an X-Lite guardrail, and their family later reached a settlement. Steve also filed suit against Lindsay, the manufacturer, which denied responsibility and suggested the specific rail may not have been built by them. Steve has continued to speak publicly, support other grieving families, and press for accountability and roadway safety improvements. Hannah was laid to rest days after the crash. She is remembered by her family as intelligent, compassionate, and full of promise. Her story became part of a larger national debate over infrastructure safety testing standards and oversight. What happened on Interstate 75 transformed one family's life and helped bring scrutiny to a product that was meant to protect drivers on America's highways. Ashery Ryan and Nicole Lorraine Linton. August 4, 2022 was an ordinary summer afternoon in Windsor Hills, Los Angeles. Around 1:30 p.m., traffic moved steadily through the busy intersection of La Brea Avenue and Slauson Avenue. Among the drivers was 23-year-old Ashery Ryan. She was on her way to a prenatal appointment, a routine visit filled with anticipation. In the car with her were her boyfriend, 24-year-old Reynold Lester, their 11-month-old son, Alonzo Quintero, and the child she was carrying, a baby boy they planned to name Armani. It was a short drive, a familiar route, one more small step toward a growing future. At the same time, 37-year-old Nicole Lorraine Linton, a traveling nurse from Houston, Texas, was approaching the same intersection in a black Mercedes-Benz. Surveillance footage later showed her vehicle traveling at approximately 130 miles per hour in a 35-mile-per-hour zone. The traffic light had been red for about 15 seconds when her car entered the intersection. Data from the vehicle indicated that the accelerator pedal had been fully depressed for several seconds before impact, with the speed increasing from roughly 122 to 130 miles per hour at the moment of collision. The Mercedes slammed into Ashery Ryan's Jaguar with immense force. The impact split the vehicle in half and ignited a fire that quickly spread to other cars. In total, 9 vehicles were involved in the crash. Witnesses described a loud explosion-like sound and a sudden wall of flames stretching across the roadway. Ashery Ryan, Reynold Lester, Alonzo Quintero, and unborn baby Armani were killed instantly. Two additional women in another vehicle, 43-year-old Nathasia Lewis and 38-year-old Lynette Noble, also lost their lives. 6 people died within seconds. Nicole Linton survived with moderate injuries and was arrested at the scene. She was charged with multiple counts, including murder and vehicular manslaughter, and has been held without bail. Prosecutors argued that the evidence showed deliberate acceleration and awareness, citing surveillance video and vehicle data. Her defense attorney stated that she may have experienced a medical or mental health episode that caused her to lose awareness of her actions. It was disclosed that she had a history of mental health struggles and had been involved in a prior crash in 2020 where someone was injured. Investigators also revealed that she had searched online phrases such as, "Can you see your death coming?" days before the incident. In the year following the crash, a memorial known as the Slauson 6 Memorial was established at the intersection. It includes a bench, a garden, photographs of the victims, and an ultrasound image of baby Armani. Community members gathered on the first anniversary to release white doves in remembrance. Local officials initiated traffic studies and safety improvements in response to public concern. As legal proceedings continue, the crash remains one of the most devastating traffic incidents in Los Angeles in recent years. What occurred in a matter of seconds at a busy intersection permanently altered multiple families and left a lasting mark on the Windsor Hills community. If you believe justice must be fully served in the case of Ashery Ryan and the Slauson 6, hit like and comment 1 below to stand with the families who are still waiting for answers. Gracie Machado Brooklyn. Triplet, Austin Holt, Madison Robertson, Addison Gratz, and Memory Wilson. On March 22, 2022, in the small town of Tishomingo, Oklahoma, 6 teenage girls left their high school campus during their lunch break. It was an ordinary midday moment in a town of just over 3,000 people where everyone knew each other and routines rarely changed. Packed into a 2015 Chevy Spark built for 4 passengers were Gracie Machado Brooklyn Triplet, Austin Holt, Madison Robertson, Addison A.J. Gratz, and Memory Wilson. They were between 15 and 17 years old. They were close friends. They were simply going for a short drive. Less than an hour later, all 6 were gone. The crash occurred at a location locals call the Y, where Oklahoma State Highway 22 meets U.S. Highway 377. The intersection is shaped by a sharp curve and limited visibility, a design that residents had long described as dangerous and confusing. Around 12:30 p.m., the girls were traveling east on Highway 22. They stopped at the sign and began turning onto US 377. At that same moment, a large rock-hauling semi-truck driven by 51-year-old Valentin Burton was approaching along the highway. Burton, a grandfather and volunteer firefighter, was wearing his seatbelt and was not injured. According to investigators, he was unable to stop in time. The truck struck the Chevy Spark on its side and pushed the small vehicle nearly 300 feet. The impact crushed the car. Emergency responders arrived to find it torn apart. Only the 2 front seat occupants were wearing seatbelts. 4 of the girls, including the 16-year-old driver, died at the scene. The remaining 2 were transported to a hospital where they later succumbed to their injuries. The names of the victims quickly spread throughout Tishomingo. Gracie Machado was remembered by her sister as a best friend. Brooklyn Triplet was known as a cheerleader and softball player, described as loyal and kind. Austin Holt was active in the Future Farmers of America and proudly showed prize hogs at local events. Madison Robertson's family called her a beautiful soul. Addison Gratz was deeply cherished by her grandfather. Memory Wilson was a young mother with a small daughter who depended on her. Photos from the scene showed the Chevy Spark completely destroyed, a pink steering wheel cover still visible inside the wreckage. The Oklahoma Highway Patrol confirmed the crash happened just beyond a 90-degree curve on US 377. No criminal charges were filed against the truck driver. Investigations by state authorities and the National Transportation Safety Board followed, examining road design, visibility, and contributing factors. Safety experts noted that crash risk increases significantly when teen drivers carry multiple underage passengers. Research indicates that even 1 additional teen passenger raises the likelihood of a crash, and the risk grows with each added passenger. Seatbelt use was also a concern, particularly because Oklahoma law does not require backseat passengers over the age of 7 to wear one. The tragedy devastated the town. Signs reading Tishomingo Strong appeared throughout the community. Classes resumed with counselors available for grieving students. A candlelight vigil was held on the school's football field. Country singer Blake Shelton, who owns property nearby and had previously lost his own brother in a crash, shared condolences reflecting the heartbreak felt across the region. For Tishomingo, March 22, 2022 marked a day that permanently changed the community. 6 teenage lives ended within moments at an intersection many had long considered hazardous. The investigation continued, but the loss remained immediate and deeply personal for a town struggling to move forward. George Russell Weller. On July 16, 2003, the weekly farmers market in Santa Monica, California was in full swing along Arizona Avenue. The street had been closed to traffic and thousands of people moved between vendor stalls selecting fresh produce, flowers, and baked goods. Families pushed strollers, elderly couples browsed tables, tourists paused to take photos. Nearly 9,000 people were expected that afternoon. It was a routine community event, lively and orderly, protected by barricades designed to keep vehicles out. At approximately 1:47 p.m., 86-year-old George Russell Weller was driving his 1992 Buick LeSabre westbound on Arizona Avenue. As he approached the intersection near the market, his vehicle first struck a 2003 Mercedes-Benz stopped at a crosswalk. Instead of stopping, the Buick accelerated. Witnesses reported that Weller drove around the temporary barricades and entered the crowded market area. Over the next 15 to 20 seconds, the car traveled nearly 1,000 feet through the vendor-lined street at speeds estimated between 40 and 60 miles per hour, with some estimates higher. The vehicle plowed through tables and stalls, striking dozens of pedestrians. Some victims were thrown into the air. Others were pinned beneath the car or crushed against market stands. The chaos unfolded rapidly, leaving little time for people to react. The car finally came to a stop after a pedestrian landed on the windshield, obstructing the driver's view. A nearby police officer on bicycle patrol pulled Weller from the vehicle. 10 people were killed, including a 3-year-old girl. More than 70 others were injured, some critically. 2 of the most severely hurt victims were toddlers. Emergency responders covered parts of the scene with tarps as helicopters filmed from above. Witnesses described confusion and disbelief. One woman was found alive beneath the vehicle, and bystanders worked together to lift the car until first responders arrived. Weller was transported to a hospital for testing. Authorities confirmed that there were no drugs or alcohol in his system. He later stated that he had accidentally pressed the accelerator instead of the brake and panicked when he realized his mistake. Investigators examined the vehicle and found no evidence of mechanical failure. Despite the scale of the tragedy, Weller was not arrested at the scene. Officials cited his age, lack of flight risk, and cooperation. Ultimately, he was never criminally charged. In the years that followed, more than 30 civil lawsuits were filed by victims and their families. By 2008, the city of Santa Monica had paid approximately $21 million in settlements. Questions were raised about elderly driver oversight and prior warnings regarding traffic safety at the market location. 3 years before the crash, a police officer had reportedly expressed concern that the market's layout could pose a risk. After the incident, the city installed stronger permanent barriers at a cost of over $200,000 to prevent vehicles from entering the market space. George Russell Weller lived under full-time care until his death on December 9, 2010 at the age of 94. For the victims and survivors, the events of that afternoon left lasting physical and emotional scars. What began as a normal summer day at a community market ended in one of the most devastating pedestrian crashes in California history. Princess Diana, August 31, 1997, Paris after midnight. For the world, she was the people's princess, luminous, compassionate, forever surrounded by camera flashes and public adoration. Diana had transformed royalty into something human, something vulnerable. Even after her divorce from Prince Charles, she remained one of the most photographed women on Earth. Every movement documented, every relationship dissected, every smile analyzed as if it carried hidden meaning. That night, she was riding in the back seat of a black Mercedes-Benz S280, leaving the Ritz Hotel with Dodi Fayed. Outside, paparazzi waited in a swarm of flashing bulbs and roaring engines. The car sped away into the Paris night, entering the Pont de l'Alma tunnel along the Seine. Moments later, it was over. The Mercedes crashed into a pillar inside the tunnel at high speed. Dodi Fayed and the driver Henri Paul were pronounced dead at the scene. Diana was still alive when emergency responders arrived. She was transported to Pitié-Salpêtrière Hospital, where surgeons fought for hours to save her. At 4 a.m., she was declared dead. She was 36 years old. The official French investigation later concluded that the crash was caused by excessive speed and the driver's impairment. Toxicology reports stated that Henri Paul had alcohol in his system, and the vehicle was estimated to be traveling far beyond the speed limit while attempting to evade pursuing photographers. Subsequent British investigations, including Operation Paget, supported the conclusion that it was a tragic accident. Yet the aftermath refused to stay simple. The world erupted in grief. Millions lined the streets of London during her funeral procession. Mountains of flowers covered the gates of Kensington Palace. Elton John's rewritten version of Candle in the Wind became an anthem of collective mourning. But alongside the sorrow came suspicion. Questions about the paparazzi, about security decisions, about what truly happened inside that tunnel circulated for years. Conspiracy theories spread globally, amplified by the scale of the loss and the aura that had always surrounded her life. Princess Diana's death was more than a car crash. It marked a cultural rupture, a moment when celebrity, media obsession, and monarchy collided under fluorescent tunnel lights. The investigation files closed, but the image remains frozen in public memory, flashing cameras, twisted metal, and a princess whose life ended in the very glare she had lived within for decades. Paul Walker. November 30th, 2013. Santa Clarita, California. Paul Walker was a face the world associated with speed. As one of the stars of the Fast and Furious franchise, he had built a career around high-performance cars, loyalty, and brotherhood. Off-screen, he was known for his charity work and quiet personality, often described as grounded despite global fame. That afternoon, he had attended a charity event for Reach Out Worldwide, the disaster relief organization he founded. It was meant to be a brief appearance before returning to filming. After the event, Walker left as a passenger in a red 2005 Porsche Carrera GT driven by his friend and business associate Roger Rodas. Minutes later, on a stretch of Hercules Street, the car accelerated. According to the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, the vehicle was traveling at a speed estimated between 80 and 93 miles per hour in a 45-mile-per-hour zone. The driver lost control. The Porsche struck a light pole and several trees before bursting into flames. The impact and fire were catastrophic. Both Walker and Rodas died at the scene. Investigators later determined that speed was the primary cause of the crash, with no evidence of mechanical failure. Toxicology reports found no drugs or alcohol in Walker's system. The Carrera GT, known for its powerful engine and demanding handling characteristics, became part of the broader public conversation about performance vehicles and safety. News of his death spread rapidly across social media and global news outlets. Fans gathered at the crash site, leaving flowers, candles, and handwritten messages. Production on Furious 7 was halted as the cast and crew mourned. The film was later completed using a combination of visual effects and the involvement of Walker's brothers to finish his remaining scenes. When it premiered in 2015, the final tribute sequence became one of the most emotional moments in franchise history, closing with the line that echoed far beyond the screen for Paul. In the years that followed, legal actions were filed against Porsche by Walker's daughter and Rodas's widow, raising questions about vehicle design and crash safety. Some cases were eventually settled. Official findings, however, maintained that excessive speed was the decisive factor. Paul Walker's death carried a striking irony, an actor synonymous with cinematic street racing losing his life in a real-world crash. Yet for those who knew him, the loss extended beyond the headlines and horsepower. It marked the sudden end of a life still deeply active in family philanthropy and film. A single afternoon drive transformed into a permanent chapter in Hollywood history, forever linking his name not only to speed on screen, but to the fragility that exists beyond it. If Paul Walker's legacy still lives in your heart, take a moment and comment "Amen" below in his memory. James Dean. September 30th, 1955 began like a scene already written for the screen. James Dean was 24 years old, standing at the edge of superstardom. East of Eden had introduced him to audiences as a brooding new force in Hollywood, and Rebel Without a Cause was about to premiere a film that would define a generation. He wasn't just an actor. He was becoming a symbol youth wrapped in defiance, vulnerability, masked by cool detachment. Fame was rising fast, but so was his appetite for speed. Dean loved racing. It wasn't a publicity stunt or a casual thrill, it was serious, technical, personal. That afternoon, he was driving his silver Porsche 550 Spyder to Salinas for a sports car race. The car was lightweight, powerful, and notoriously unforgiving. He had nicknamed it Little Bastard, a name painted in red script across its body. Days earlier, actor Alec Guinness reportedly told Dean the car looked dangerous and urged him not to drive it, a comment that would later feel haunting in hindsight. At approximately 5:45 p.m. near the rural junction of California Highways 46 and 41 in Cholum, Dean's Porsche approached an intersection. A 1950 Ford Tudor driven by 23-year-old Donald Turnipseed was traveling in the opposite direction. Turnipseed began making a left turn across the highway. According to the official investigation, he later said he did not see the low-profile Porsche in time. The vehicles collided nearly head-on. The impact was catastrophic. The lightweight Spyder absorbed the full force. Dean suffered severe internal injuries and a broken neck. He was transported by ambulance to a hospital in Paso Robles but was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. His passenger, German mechanic Rolf Wutherich, survived with serious injuries. Turnipseed sustained minor injuries and was not criminally charged. Investigators concluded that the crash resulted from Turnipseed's failure to yield with speed, considered a contributing factor, though estimates of Dean's exact speed have varied over the decades. News of Dean's death spread rapidly across the United States. He had completed only 3 major films. Rebel Without a Cause premiered less than a month later, and audiences watched a young man wrestle with alienation and identity, unaware that the actor portraying that restless energy was already gone. The tragedy transformed him instantly from rising star to cultural legend. His image, red jacket, intense gaze, cigarette between fingers, became permanent, untouched by time. In the years that followed, stories surrounding the wreckage of the Porsche fueled further fascination. Parts of the car were reportedly sold, and accounts circulated of subsequent accidents involving those components. Whether coincidence or embellishment, the mythology deepened, reinforcing the aura that had always surrounded him. James Dean's life ended on a quiet stretch of California highway, but his legacy only intensified. Frozen at 24, he remains one of Hollywood's most enduring icons, a symbol of brilliance interrupted, of promise suspended, and of a single collision that ensured he would never grow old in the public eye. 8 crashes, 8 moments that changed history forever. If these stories stayed with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. This channel uncovers the truths behind the headlines and the stories the world still can't forget. Still can't forget. Still can't forget. Paul Walker. November 30th, 2013. Santa Clarita, California. Paul Walker was a face the world associated with speed. As one of the stars of the Fast and Furious franchise, he had built a career around high-performance cars, loyalty, and brotherhood. Off-screen, he was known for his charity work and quiet personality, often described as grounded despite global fame. That afternoon, he had attended a charity event for Reach Out Worldwide, the disaster relief organization he founded. It was meant to be a brief appearance before returning to filming. After the event, Walker left as a passenger in a red 2005 Porsche Carrera GT driven by his friend and business associate Roger Rodas. Minutes later, on a stretch of Hercules Street, the car accelerated. According to the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, the vehicle was traveling at a speed estimated between 80 and 93 miles per hour in a 45-mile-per-hour zone. The driver lost control. The Porsche struck a light pole and several trees before bursting into flames. The impact and fire were catastrophic. Both Walker and Rodas died at the scene. Investigators later determined that speed was the primary cause of the crash, with no evidence of mechanical failure. Toxicology reports found no drugs or alcohol in Walker's system. The Carrera GT, known for its powerful engine and demanding handling characteristics, became part of the broader public conversation about performance vehicles and safety. News of his death spread rapidly across social media and global news outlets. Fans gathered at the crash site, leaving flowers, candles, and handwritten messages. Production on Furious 7 was halted as the cast and crew mourned. The film was later completed using a combination of visual effects and the involvement of Walker's brothers to finish his remaining scenes. When it premiered in 2015, the final tribute sequence became one of the most emotional moments in franchise history, closing with the line that echoed far beyond the screen for Paul. In the years that followed, legal actions were filed against Porsche by Walker's daughter and Rotus's widow, raising questions about vehicle design and crash safety. Some cases were eventually settled. Official findings, however, maintained that excessive speed was the decisive factor. Paul Walker's death carried a striking irony, an actor synonymous with cinematic street racing losing his life in a real-world crash. Yet for those who knew him, the loss extended beyond the headlines and horsepower. It marked the sudden end of a life still deeply active in family philanthropy and film. A single afternoon drive transformed into a permanent chapter in Hollywood history, forever linking his name not only to speed on screen, but to the fragility that exists beyond it. If Paul Walker's legacy still lives in your heart, take a moment and comment "Amen" below in his memory.